Okay, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and get started. On behalf of IMEA and District 3, I would like to welcome you to today's virtual PD opportunity. Today, we have the pleasure of learning from Dr. Derek Ganong from Boise State University. Dr. Ganong will discuss the many opportunities presented by online and asynchronous jazz band instruction. Discussion topics this evening will include jazz ensemble, improvisation, musicianship, and music technology, and how these strategies can prepare your music students for the future. Today's presentation will be recorded and can be viewed later on the new IMEA YouTube channel, where you will be able to access all of these virtual PD opportunities. Dr. Ganong will be taking the last 10 to 15 minutes to answer questions, so feel free to put them in the chat or jot it down to ask at the end. I would like to thank Meghan Olswanger and the leadership of District 3 for hosting tonight's professional development. Please remember that we are trying to continue these opportunities throughout the fall and are still looking for volunteers to present on their expertise. And with that, I would like to turn the time over to Dr. Derek Ganong. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, I thought I unmuted, but now I'm actually unmuted. So, this goes along with probably the first thing that I'm going to say, and that's 80% of your time spent with music technology or technology at all is going to be spent troubleshooting. I tell that to my students. And we certainly just experienced that. But we have a pretty small crew watching tonight, and I know that, that this is a crazy time in the semester for everybody. So maybe we can actually get, some conversations with those of us who are here now at some point and talk about individually what challenges you're facing, and I can maybe give some suggestions there. But as you can see here on the slides that I'm sharing on the left, there's a little QR code. I have a handout that you're all welcome to have that will also be posted along with these lecture slides once this gets up onto the YouTube channel, where I'm confident will be the most accessed video of all time in the universe. But you can go ahead and use your phone and check out that QR code, and it'll grab the handout. There's a bunch of links, some published documents, a couple of handouts I created, and a couple of worksheets that are based on sort of reflection and story work and things like that that I think you may find useful. So as we can see, the title tonight is Moving the Big Band Online. And yes, catchy title. It will fit on the headline of a newspaper. But I think that what we're doing tonight is so much more about how we can prepare our students for the future and how we can capitalize on the opportunities that are presented to us right now. And what I mean by that as well, there are things that we no longer are having to do because of COVID-19, such as like live performances and things like that. And so it kind of explodes the range of possibilities for us to prepare our students for opportunities in the future. And so I have a little outline over here on the left. I'll talk a little bit about my rationale. I probably won't do a whole lot of that. I'm kind of preaching to the choir tonight. But we'll talk about technology. We'll talk about inertia, but not in the physics sense. And we'll talk about student-driven possibilities, opportunities that are presented by online learning. And then I'll probably spend a lot of time talking about some ideas and resources for how we can take our jazz band and take learning objectives and move them online and not only do something, but also do things that maybe we didn't have the opportunity to do in the previous setup. So moving along here. First thing we're going to talk about, technology. And I don't have to tell anyone this, but we do live in a digital society, whether we like it or not. And now that we are, forced to be remote and at home and things like that, we really can't afford to ignore it anymore, like a lot of us have been. And and I want to, the caveat to that too is this bottom point is that I myself am the Oregon Trail generation. I didn't grow up with technology. I didn't grow up with Facebook. I didn't grow up with all those things. So it has been a learning experience for me too, to jump in feet first and recognizing that so many of my students and our students, we really are what we call digital natives. And so, they've totally grown up with a cell phone in their hand, and they can perfectly account for their social actions, and they can interact with their friends on video games, and they don't have to go down to the park to have social life and things like that. And the perspective that we have from the Oregon Trail and beyond and prior is that, oh, kids have to go to the park and they have to play outside and they have to do all the things that we did, otherwise they're never going to make it. And while we definitely recognize that those are important and we need to be together and we are social creatures, that there are certainly opportunities that can happen, and above all else, kids and humans are adaptable. And so I talk a lot to groups about what I call the shattered screen mentality. And this is something I've observed kind of in educational technology and technology in general, and that a lot of what we're being presented with to use, I'm looking at you, Flipgrid, are pieces of technology that are designed to be one-button solutions for something. And by shattered screen, I mean, we all know someone who has a shattered cell phone screen. And there's two kinds of people: those who just deal with it or put a piece of tape over it until it's time to get a new phone, and those who Google how to fix it for $10 and fix it. And I really think that technology in education needs to be a part of every class, and we need to be teaching students about process and about troubleshooting and about the nature of how technology works and functions, because those are ultimately going to be skills that help them later on in their life. And that is really what employers are looking for. They're looking for people who can adapt and learn complex systems and thrive in those environments, and not just deal with something that's broken. And so that's the first thing that I'm going to say about technology. And we're going to talk a lot about how technology can revolutionize what we're doing. But I have students and I have colleagues who don't know the difference between their Wi-Fi and their internet and things like that. And I believe that diving feet first into all these problems can be really rewarding for us, and our students are kind of almost a step ahead of us. They are a step ahead of us in all these ways, and so we can maybe lean on their expertise sometimes. So, DAW. I'm not gonna pretend that everyone knows what DAW means. DAW means Digital Audio Workstation, and it's basically software that allows you to record and edit and manipulate sound. And they come in many shapes and flavors and forms. And those of you who saw Casey Lindorfer's presentation a week or two ago on Soundtrap, that is just one example of a fairly simple online digital audio workstation. And there's a couple other ones floating around. There's one that I'm going to talk about tonight that's totally 100% free. Actually, there's two. And actually I've verified that they work pretty well on Chromebooks, which is something that I know at least a lot of the students in Ada County are one-to-oneing on those. But digital audio workstations, they can really enhance our learning in the music sphere, because they allow us to have sort of continuous reflective practice. Whereas before, our students playing their instruments was them getting some sort of a sound out and possibly laughing about it and then moving on to another sound. But with the digital audio workstation, we have the ability to constantly record and listen back. It's instantaneous reflection. And you can play along with the recording, and you can A/B analyze how you sound versus the recording, and you can record with colleagues and reflect on tendencies in everyone's playing. There's evidence of increased musicianship with this reflective practice. There's also more opportunities for students to take ownership for what they're doing, because they get to decide whether or not what they just played is what they want to represent themselves, instead of predetermining that it's not going to be good and then just doing it anyways. And this provides an opportunity for students to develop more of a growth mindset, through this process of continuously reflecting on what they're going to do. Other ways that digital audio workstations can help enhance learning is they allow for more opportunities to collaborate. You don't have to work with everyone's schedule. You don't have to find a rehearsal room. You can basically collaborate with anyone on the internet. And the sky is basically the limit as far as creativity is concerned, because there are so many different ways that you can come up with a project and create music, and students can develop and explore their own values in the music, and because students have a lot of experience listening to music. It might not be the music that we want them to play, but it still is, they still do have some skills and things that they've already learned in that way. There's also, one of my favorite things to do with digital audio workstation software is to sort of plan my progress. And so instead of it being accidental, I kind of have a record of how I did and what I did. And so, my progress can be planned and systematic. And, you can create scale playing exercises. You can have students play along with things. You can have students play along with each other. And it's basically all about developing this continuous inner dialogue of I played, how did I play, how should I play next, as opposed to, well, that was that. And this is a problem, that extends all the way through higher education to our recital and jury process, where, students recognize that they don't always play their best in their lesson. They don't always play their best on their recital. They don't always play their best at solo and ensemble. This software gives students the ability to really put their best foot forward. So I think there's a lot of things that you can do with this type of software. I think it really will revolutionize learning in the same way that Microsoft Word has revolutionized writing essays. So moving on a little bit, I'm gonna ask you all now. You don't have to say anything, and feel free to smile or chuckle or shake your head or show some fingers from your hands to me. But let's ask ourselves, what the jazz band. We're talking about what value does jazz band bring to your school, and so I want to talk about three different perspectives. One is the director's perspective. That's me and you guys, and sort of what value does a jazz band provide to a music department. And I'll probably assert that it's coming from my perspective, it's an opportunity to show the value of my group to the stakeholders, and those stakeholders would be the people who decide whether or not my class exists, or people who are going to potentially donate money, or parents or students who want to come and play in my group. When we're talking about the administrator's perspective, we're talking about what value does it represent to your school. And for your administrators, it's your performance, how well you do at festival, your scores, and maybe probably the pep band and the marching band. And so they're concerned with that sort of approach. And then we have the external value, which is our parents' perspective, and and parents effectively, the history of jazz bands in music education in the United States is rooted in parents saying, hey, my kid is playing one do a part and is playing dance band music, and that's my pop music. And so parents are really concerned with the final performance. And so, as you've already read on my slide, the value I'm assessing here is that basically everything that we do in a jazz band, in college, in high school, wherever, is where we're preparing for our performance. And kind of everything falls by the wayside because we have to have a good performance. And so our the typical director's inner dialogue. Here's some more humor-focused things here, but basically, can we get through the tunes? Does it sound good? Is it obvious that we're doing things that are good? Do our solos sound okay? Are the trumpets darn bells up? I play the trumpet. Where the heck is insert essential ensemble member? Or where the heck is insert item essential to function of instrument? Do we have enough music to play for the concert? And did I leave the trumpets with enough gas for pep band? These are all sort of things that go through all of our heads when we're running a jazz band in person. And and I want to point out that nothing on this list is very student focused. It's all focused on how do we justify the value to those perspectives that we just talked about before. And so this kind of brings me to my next point here, that if we're doing a online jazz band, then effectively we're saying, all right, we're not doing a performance. We're not having to meet in person. And by taking that out of the equation, we are opening the door for a bevy of other things that we can do that are actually student focused and student driven. And so I've come up with a series of sort of learning goals or areas that we can more ably address if we don't have to just rehearse. And you can read these here: familiarity with the tendencies of our instruments, enhance aural skills with respect to harmony and intonation, with respect to musical aesthetic, musicianship through diverse rhythmic exposure, all sorts of things that we can do. And if we're just rehearsing our band, we're going to lean on our strongest players. The other people are going to sort of play catch up, and it's not really student focused to begin with. And so I also kind of want to point out that a performing experience doesn't necessarily require a big performance either. And in many situations, students are more apt to play their best or take a risk if they're not in such a high-risk environment. That's not to say we shouldn't perform, but I kind of want to do away with the blanket statement that if we can't meet in person, we can't have a band. And I think that there are a lot of important things that we can do with music education online. And like I said, there are plenty of opportunities. And those opportunities are essentially preparing our students for the future. And the future, holds many things. And we all know that if you go to college and you major in music, that you tend to have a ton of career mobility. And in fact, there are statistics that show that people who are accepted to med school who have music degrees, there's a higher percentage of them than other degrees and what have you. And it's no surprise because music is such a multimodal form of teaching and learning, and teaches so many things that are valuable. But now we're looking at a future in a digital society, and we can be preparing our students for commercial music, which is basically everything that's not playing in a symphony or recording an album of the all-state list music, which is a lot of music. There's a lot of commercial music out there. We're talking about commercial media and games, film, TV, etc. I have a good friend who I went to NYU with, and she just finished recording the score to an HBO show, and it was done 100% remote. And so that just shows you the level of quality you can attain. And over this summer, I did a number of fully remote brass ensemble recording sessions, complete with video, for the Brass Institutes of Virginia, and those will be posted on YouTube at some point. But we created a great product. We did Frank DeKelly's Blue Shades for 10 brass, and amongst other things. And so we can be exposing our students to these areas of employment and these areas of technology, and they'll run with it. And this all basically leads to our career mobility, is that we're teaching critical thinking, professional skills, interpersonal skills, and having our students possess broad technical competencies that will help them. So, moving a little bit on into our ideas section. I kind of blew through that initial section, but this is, I think, where we are we're really caring about this, and you all are here because you're saying, all right, where are some ideas for me to take my band online? And so I have a couple of different categories that we're going to talk about in this particular section, and I think they basically all revolve, with the exception of maybe one, they really revolve around the idea that technology enables and creates opportunities. And so being comfortable with that technology and taking your students through it is very, very important. So talking about ensemble skills, this is, many would say impossible. You can't do this without meeting together. And yes, it's easier if you meet together, but there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. And, first of all, we're talking about digital audio workstations. And so you've been exposed to Soundtrap, and then BandLab is another one. It's another browser-based program, and BandLab is 100% free. When compared to Soundtrap, it's less, you can't really create lesson plans that are built in, and it's kind of open collaboration. So the walled garden concept that I'm sure Casey talked to you all about doesn't really exist, but it is free and it works very well. And I have gotten it to work on a Chromebook, of all things, but it functions very well. And what you could do is and I can even show you guys, but you can throw in a recording of something you're playing, a professional recording, and you can have your students play along and record their part while listening to that recording, and then you can take away the recording. I know Casey showed you guys an example of that type of a project, but this can be really cool because this is how everyone who played jazz ever learned how to do it back in the day. Is they listened to the radio, or they wore out records and they tried to emulate. And so nothing could be more beneficial than emulating. And I don't think I've ever run into a freshman first year who has transcribed a jazz solo. So another thing we can do is I like to call follow the leader, where you can take your trumpet section and take the shout chorus to Shiny Stockings, for example, or something like that, and say, okay, everyone record your part by yourself. And then, all right, everyone record your part along with someone else, and then you keep stacking, and you can see what happens when when the lead trumpet player records first, and then everyone records their part after that, or what happens when the fourth trumpet player records first, and everyone records their part after that. And it can really sort of elucidate how ensemble interplay works, and you can do this for all your different sections. And you can also, of course, do remote recording projects where you can set up a click track and have students record their part and listen back. And it's one of these things that it takes some planning, but it really is no big deal. And you can do it with very, very little to low technology, especially if it's just a learning tool. With Boise State Jazz Orchestra, we're doing a more involved type of a project this semester, and I hope to be able to share that with you pending complete technical failure. There's a couple of non-digital audio workstation focused ideas that will help with your ensemble skills, and one, of course, is transcription. Play along and reflect, and they can film it on their phone. They don't need to have digital audio workstation for that. You can do critical analysis of performances, where you can challenge your students. Here's a big band recording. See if you can find things in pop music that resemble this, or can you find things in pop music that use your instrument? And you can also do playing challenges. And yes, I put Flipgrid down here, but you can have students, students have already done this 100-day practice challenge I've seen going around Instagram, and they're already interacting on a very regular basis with each other. And so why not, maximize that and use that and say, okay, I'm going to play. Now you play with me, and just challenge them to go around those particular ways. And you'll be amazed how well you can learn how to play by playing along with professional recordings. Moving on to improvisation, here's something that I know I didn't get any of in high school until I went to Interlochen, and this is it can be an intimidating thing to teach. And I want to take this opportunity to say that improvisation is one part learning your scales, and 76,544 parts aural skills. And so really, if you can hear it, you can probably play it, and if you've played your scales, you can definitely play it. And so 3 things that I want to provide up front are the J. Mabersold Volume 104 and Volume 2. And the Volume 104 is basically like free play, which means it's not jazz improvisation, it's just improvisation. And it can be a really cool icebreaker. And I use this in my jazz techniques class all the time. Get your bass clarinet player improvising over the drone track or something like that. And then the Volume 2, and of course you can take those recordings, throw them into BandLab, and have your students make their own track where they compose the melody and play it and improvise a little bit. And then of course the Volume 2, which covers the 2-5-1, which, as we know, is the most important musical sequence in jazz. And that's a way for approaching the bebop approach to jazz, which is our beginning incept of knowledge that turns us into informed improvisers. And then we have Ireal B, which is an app that works on everything except for Windows. You can emulate it on Windows, and it's about $20, but you can import basically every chord change that ever existed, and it will play them back in whatever key, in whatever transposition, in whatever style, and you can even create your own chord progressions. And so, you could have your students transcribe the chord changes to their favorite thing on the radio or whatever. Or you could create practice tracks practicing in particular keys and say, hey, if you want to learn your B major scale, learn how to improvise in B major without playing notes that aren't B major. There are all sorts of other things you can do. I've come up with this like Mad Lib project in BandLab where the teacher could start by improvising something and it's recorded up there, and then everyone is assigned at a certain time to go up and continue the musical phrase and see what you guys can come up with. It can be a really cool thing to do. And of course, there's a bunch of online resources for jazz improvisation that are on the handout. And finally, the importance of rhythmic aesthetic. And I think that the rhythm is one of the biggest distinguishing factors between commercial music and classical music. Is the way in which the rhythm is approached. And so there's an app called Drum Genius that takes actual drum patterns from famous recordings. I practice my scales to Drum Genius all the time. And of course, you can go low tech and put your metronome on 2 and 4. You will be amazed at how much trouble your highly accomplished classical musicians have playing their scales with the metronome on 2 and 4. And it just really goes to show how dependent on bar, line, and downbeat we've become in classical music. And so that's something that can really expand those horizons. Theory is another thing that you can approach on your online jazz band curriculum. And in jazz, theory is fundamentally linked to improvisation, just like composition is. And if you don't believe me, just look at any university, and there really is no such thing as a PhD in jazz composition or in jazz theory. They're basically all the same professors at a university. They teach all of it because it's all so linked. And so along with that, have your students teach the modes of the major scale to their parents. That could be a really fun and entertaining video to watch. Or have them, reduce chord changes of jazz standards to the related major key. Or have them simplify, the 2-5-1s to the major keys. There's a lot of different ways you can have them thinking about chord changes and reading jazz notation and creating those links. And with audio examples, they can also be creating those aural links in their ears too. Because jazz theory is just like chemistry. Everything is named by literally what it is. And I found, the better I got at understanding jazz theory, the easier it was for me to connect the dots in classical theory. I used to never really be comfortable, with counterpoint and things like that. And as soon as I started learning about like bass function and playing jazz, I was like, hey, that's figured bass. Hey, counterpoint now makes sense. Thirds and fifths, sevenths and roots. Really is kind of amazing. And so, this can help your students with their musicianship and with their aural skills. And, if the ultimate objective isn't play this tune and I don't care how you do it, but make it sound right, but instead it's more student driven, they will really respond and run with that, I think. And then finally, in the composition area, we're talking about having your students create compositions. In BandLab, there's a drum machine, there's beat makers. I do this with my Intro to Music Tech class at Boise State, and the students absolutely love it and come up with some really amazing music on their own. And they can create music. You can ask them to do it in a particular style. You can ask them to play their instrument. You can say, create the craziest drum track, trap style you can ever create, but it has to be in 4/4 time, and you have to play all 12 major scales. Now that's become a cool assignment. And it's got to be swing, right? You can challenge the students to, again, create things that are both meaningful to them and can demonstrate some kind of a learning outcome. And then, of course, we have Ireal Pro again, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but you can have them create their own chord changes or take a jazz standard that you've been working on and modify some of the chord changes and see how it sounds. It can really teach them about voice leading and about trusting their ear to help determine where sounds go or what sounds correct, because ultimately the ears are what it's all about. Have them transcribe their favorite pop song. You can cycle through all the chord changes until it sounds like the one they're hearing on the record, and they didn't even know that they did some aural skills training. And the final thing I want to talk about is sort of my big pedestal at the moment is reflective practice, and the act of finding meaning in what you're doing and recognizing how what you're learning will contribute to your future, which is linked to recognizing what you might want your future to be, and saying, how did I get here, and what's meaningful to me, and how do I want to progress further on. And this is something that's taking off in higher education at the moment. But it's really helping to have students take ownership over who they are and what they're doing, and to not be afraid to have values in their education, and not simply just doing it because they're told they have to. And really, it's all about beyond the classroom, beyond the major. How does this help you later in life? And so I have a couple of worksheets that are in the handout that deal with this. One of them is like a reverse resume, where students can write down, what kind of a career they want to have, and then they have to write, okay, what kind of education and certification do I need to have, and where in my life might I get those kinds of things. That can really help focus students. And there's a couple of other exercises in there that are pretty short and easy. I think a really cool one is like, create a 10-word headline that describes your life in 10 years or something like that. Or come up with a list of 3 things that you're passionate about, 3 things that you're really good at, and 3 things that you can do that make money. And now come up with a project that involves at least one thing from each category. And I did this with a group of students at Boise State, and I found out some things that I didn't know about all those students, and that they all wanted more music technology in their lives, and this was pre-COVID-19. And this all boils down to the power of a liberal arts education, of which music and the humanities are a very, very important part. So I know I don't need to tell anyone else more about that, but I think that the jazz band is a vehicle for this, and that we're approaching the education and the curriculum of jazz band online, not as jazz band not online, which was play the concert because that's what keeps you in business. But now it's, how do we create a truly liberal arts experience out of this, and equip students with skills and abilities that will let them run in the directions that they wish to run. And I threw this in at the last second because I said, hey, I forgot this, and I saw that Megan posted on Facebook that she had a discussion with her class about history and sociology, and I said, hey, I didn't even think about that, and of course this should be in here, and of course this is something that we can and should talk about, and as a truly American art form, jazz is something that has its roots in everything that is and has made America, and it quite literally is the reason why we have music programs in high schools, is because of the dance band tradition and service members coming back from the war, and the instrument industry making instruments and parents buying them for their kids. And we can talk about that history all the way from the beginning, and we can talk about African music, we can talk about traditional jazz, dance band, big band, and then all the various different kinds of jazz that surrounded that. And we can even link it to jazz that's happening in popular music, and the idea that jazz is really just a synthesis of many things coming together. Let's see, I think I've got a question down here, and Megan says, for what it's worth, my kids were so impassioned about the conversation, I can post a video and some pre-canned lesson plans. Yeah, that would be awesome. I think we would all love to see those kinds of things. And you know, the passion that students can have about things that they know a little bit about is quite amazing. And the passion that they can have about things that they know a lot about is even more amazing. And oftentimes students are stuck in this space of like, do I say something or should I say something? And it's sort of like, you know, the roles of students and teachers in classrooms has become, you know, so systematized that it's like, you know, who does what and how and when. There's another great article that I have in the handout called The Rep Dilemma, and rep meaning repertoire. And this article talks about how in music education, and in this article it's specifically higher education, but it applies to high school as well, but that the repertoire that we play, or that we decide that we play, really dictates everything about a music department. It dictates the type and nature of ensembles we have to have, which in turn dictate the instrumentation, which in turn dictate who we have to teach those instruments in classes, which in turn dictates the value that those students have with respect to scholarship. And then, you know, all those people are involved in hiring new people, and so it just kind of continues and continues. And that's not to say that the music that we play in school is bad, but that there's a lot of music out there, and there are a lot of cultural identities and cultural art forms out there that are really important, and that by breaking this cycle of we have to play this repertoire, and it has to be with this ensemble, and it has to be with these people, that we're really opening the door to so much more that music can do for us. And of course, ask your students what's jazz, and open up YouTube, and there goes 2 hours right there, because there's, you know, so many differing opinions on various things. It looks like Megan has posted those things she said she would, so maybe we could include those when the video gets posted. But you know, that was kind of my big deep dive into this stuff, and I talked really fast, and I had no idea how engaged anyone was because I'm not seeing anybody, but I know I'm engaged because I'm passionate about this particular topic. And so, you know, I'd love to open up the floor for questions. And since there's so few of us here, you know, maybe I can provide some ideas or feedback to your specific situations or something like that. So go ahead, and I guess what we can do is we'll be good, and we can I can open up the participant tab. And if you open up the participant tab, there's a way to raise your hand, I believe. And if there's not a way to raise your hand, you can just like put the yes marker. I think as a co-host, I don't have the hand raised, but if anyone has a question or wants to talk about any of these things, I can show you guys BandLab. It might break Zoom, but we can try a little bit of that too. So who's up? Looks like Megan's got her hand up. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll just clarify. So there are actually 3 links. One kind of came through together, but I definitely needed some time to like get my ducks in a row and do some structural things. So those were really great because I could take them and basically set them free asynchronously and give them some guidelines about like what my expectations were, that they were taking notes, and that they were pausing the video, and that they were asking questions along the way, and that when we had a conversation, I expected to have not rephrasing of the previous person. So as soon as I did that, I mean, I was so surprised. They just took it so seriously. So I hope that that is something that, as you're getting going, helps you to start that conversation and also gives you some prep time.
Yes, can relate to that. I think for the first couple of classes that I'm doing here, we're basically like, can everyone access the Google Drive? No, let's fix that. And like, you know, does everyone know how to check the calendar? And does everyone know how to log on to BandLab? And you know, all these things. But it's like, you know, the I don't know if it's like this in high school, but it certainly is like this in higher education, where faculty are sitting here saying, I have so much content and so little time that there's no way that I can teach students how to use their computer too. And I just think that is the silliest perspective of all time. So
Eric, do you have ability to show really quick what BandLab looks like?
yeah, Yeah, I can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my microphone off of Zoom mode, but I may or may not be able to hear people, but I can get it back without having to restart Zoom. So Rebecca, maybe you keep your video on so you can make hand signs at me. Um, but what I'll do, oh, and first the handout here, I can go through some of those in a moment, but this here is BandLab, and let me go back to my home page of BandLab here. So here's my home page, and I have four things, and these are pre-recorded. These are things that are already recorded. I took them from the record, as it were, and I'm going to have students recording along with this for the Boise State Jazz Orchestra. And actually, we're having two bands this year because apparently people like me, and but there are four things we're going to do here, and then we're going to jump into some more involved and complicated things that involve click tracks and that don't have this and that we won't be using BandLab for. But you can create your project, and you can easily add collaborators on the same project, much like Soundtrap. So what I'm going to do, let's see, it was this one. I'm going to open this up, and we will see if things still work. Open a mixer. All right, Rebecca, give me a thumbs up if you can still hear me. Great. So here we have the interface, and it's very similar to Soundtrap. It's just darker. And it has pretty much all the same functionality. One thing that is really cool about this is that, I'm not going to click that because I might break everything, but you can select your sound source down here. And so I have an audio interface plugged in, and I can select that. And it works on a Chromebook. So I use an adapter, and I plugged my audio interface into my Chromebook, and I could address the first microphone channel. There you go. Yeah, Brittany. Dark Orchid. Love that one. The students love that tune too. I like to extend the middle solo section. So I have the original recording up here, and you can see it's frosted. And so that means it's frozen, which means it's not going to occupy a bunch of CPU time. So just like Soundtrap, you can freeze tracks, and because it's browser-based, you're going to want to take advantage of that. One thing I do want to point out I forgot is that there is an app for BandLab that you can get on a phone and you can get on a Chromebook. Do not get the app because the app will break the functionality of selecting your audio interface. So don't do the app. If your students say, I can't select the thing, that's because they're using the app. So don't use the app. But here we have it, and I have my source recording here, Thad Jones, original, for Big Dipper. And then on Monday, I went in with my mask and 10 feet between me and my drummer, and we recorded along with this. And for those of you who are friends with me on Facebook, I posted a couple of photos of that happening. But I recorded with two microphones overhead. Looks like it can condense it to a mono track. And then one microphone on the kick drum. And it was pretty simple. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to solo those. And let's see if we can hear this. Rebecca, give me a thumbs up if you can hear this once I start playing. And you won't hear anything until we get to the waves here. Drums, yeah. You can hear. And I personally like to, if I can have three microphones, I'll put them on the bass drum. So there he is. And now I'm going to go back and I'm going to play it with the original recording. I tried to follow that guy's drum fill, but I don't like that drum fill. And so I was like, so do your own drum fill. You know, we could even be like, all right, let's check out, you know, a lot of students overuse the bass drum when they're playing in a jazz band. Like a gong. And then going over to our overheads, we can hear the clarity of what's going on top. And if you have drummers like I've had in the past who like to play loud, you can really see overhead microphones will really show that. And it was like he played a little bit in the sound check. I played it back and goes, oh, I guess I don't need to hit it that hard. great. Imagine if I had had time on Monday to record, you know, a couple of my horn players, and we could hear just the horn players, or we could hear the horn players with the recording, and eventually we'll take this whole thing away, and I'll say, hey, check this out. Here's how it sounds. And I have a couple of students who are really interested in audio editing, and once we go over that part, which will be in a week and a half, I might say, everyone download all this and assign sections and say, your job is to edit all the audio in this section, line up the things that don't quite work, figure out the things that are wrong. This is, you know, part of the audio editing process. So yeah, BandLab can be really cool in this particular way. And just going back into BandLab a little more, the bar's in the way, let me hide the floating panel. So I can create new tracks down here just like we could do with Soundtrap. And I'm gonna add a track, and I'm gonna make a drum machine. And so when we have the drum machine, it's just like Soundtrap, where everything operates in MIDI code, and we can do our sequencing this particular way. So like, let me mute these. Oops. Right, so now you hear my sick beat, and it's crazy. You like the day that I show the 808 drum machine to my class at Boise State, I basically can leave the room for an hour because they will learn on their own, because they're like, oh my God, what is this? The opportunities are endless. And so I was like, all right, see if you can, you know, I said, all right, I'm going to come back in 10 minutes. I'm going to get a cup of coffee, and y'all are going to make a trap beat, and I'm going to come back. And then we made them, and I said, okay, how trap was that? And some students got it, and some students did, and said, oh, how did you get it to this way? Oh, I switched it to 16th notes. What are 16th notes, or what have you? So there's a lot of cool possibilities with this. And also, just of note, BandLab is free. Thanks, Cord. It's 100% free. And one trick, the reason why you're able to hear BandLab and me at the same time is that I have, in my audio interface, I have one of my extra outputs looped back with a cable to one of my extra inputs. So this microphone is mono channel left and then mono channel right, because Zoom can only address the top 2 channels of an interface. And then mono channel right is my looped output to input. And so that way I can hear my system sound. Yeah, and I was running 2 audio interfaces before, and occasionally I would get a wrong sample rate, and then I would start to sound like Darth Vader. Yeah, the output to input is cool. And, you know, I'm probably going to do a video at some point just talking about home audio recording gear and how to use the bells and whistles and the terminology. Because, you know, like with my music tech class, my goal is to give them all of the vocabulary so that they can Google things. Because that's what technology is all about, is Googling things that you don't know. And if you have the vocabulary, then you can Google. If you know what MIDI means, if you know what an 808, if you know 808 and the word kit, you can probably Google, where did that come from? What are those sounds? You know, what underground rap tune made that drum machine famous in analog form, and what company just released a reissue analog version of it? And the answer is Behringer. Got an LOL down here. Cord's gonna need a napkin drawing. Oh yeah, I'm aware of your challenges, Cord. Yeah, Brittany's got you too. So I've talked so much right now. Does anyone want to share? Megan shared some of her earlier experiences so far this year. Does anyone else want to share some experiences you had so far that might be useful for everyone else in jazz-wise?
Just really quickly, will you show your PDF?
Oh yeah. So here's the PDF, and I have it broken up here. This is this article that I was talking about the rep dilemma, and here's another cool article called Policy and the Political Life in Musical Education, and this talks a lot about administrators and things like that. In our software area, I have a link to Soundtrap. This is all like an annotated sort of, you know, list. Here's BandLab with a link. Audacity. This used to be the free end-all, but if you're going to go the Audacity land, I suggest PreSonus Studio One. And they gave me a heart attack because they released a new version and stopped the free one for like a month before school started. But the free version is back, and it's now version 5. And PreSonus Studio One is a fully featured digital audio workstation. In fact, I've switched full time to it from Pro Tools. And you can get the free version, and you can pay all the way up to the pro version and do crazy video editing and things like that. And so when I do like cues for my film score friends down in LA and things like that, I can pop in my video, record along with it, done. And I did a pretty long video for the IMEA thing, for the Bandmasters thing rather, on Studio One, and went into video editing and things like that. I've since switched to Adobe Premiere because it lets me do the high-res files a little easier. But DaVinci Resolve, which was the program I used before, is still free. But yeah, let's see, blah blah blah. Oh yeah, so I have a link to the version 4. But when I made this document, 5 didn't come out yet. If you just Google PreSonus Studio One 5 Prime, that is the free version. And pretty soon there's going to be a bunch of students running around the Treasure Valley who know how to use it because they're all in my class. Google Flat is a free notation software that's online and collaborative for writing music. Their MuseScore also works. There's a lot of other free ones. Dorico is busting onto the scene. The version 5 actually of PreSonus has notation built in like Apple Logic Pro. And in fact, you guys have out in Canyon County, you have Jimmy Lawrence, and he is a Logic Pro master, Apple Logic, and he gave a class to my music tech class on how to use digital audio workstations for providing instructional supports and things like that. So you should totally have him come and show everyone Logic Pro on here, because he was, he kind of turned me on to those possibilities. So yeah, Jimmy, they're coming for you. And then Ireal Pro, we talked about that. That's the chord changes app. Published resources, I have links to these Jamie Aebersold things I'm talking about. There's this thing called the Real Easy Book, which are super easy basic jazz standards with correct chord changes for all instruments that are perfect for beginning jazz combos and things like that. There's this book by Ed Sareth, who teaches at University of Michigan, called Music Theory Through Improvisation. And it's a really cool approach on teaching theory and improvisation at the same time. And then Howie Shear, trumpeter down in Los Angeles, wrote this little text called Improvisation Simplified, which I think is one of the coolest and most succinct introductions to jazz improvisation. And it's so good that I'm actually using it in Jazz Improv 1 at Boise State this semester. I think it's really, really great. And then I found NPR has this 2-part article on the history of jazz education in the United States. So this can be really cool too. And the author went to UCLA like I did, and like Megan did, hooray. So that's always a plus. I have some websites, free jazz lessons, has some cool 251 things and some cool jazz drills that you can give your students. Here's just a generic link to scholarly articles on jazz on Google Scholar. So we can start doing that instead of Wikipedia at an early age, please. And the National Museum of History, the Smithsonian Jazz Archive has a ton, including lesson plans actually, and recordings and things like that. And it's a really solid source of stuff for your jazz classes. And since it's all online, you can develop your lesson plan, and it's all through the internet. I have an Amazon shopping cart of things that I've recommended to students over the past few months. There's a big caveat here because everyone in the world is scrambling for music technology right now, and so the amount of things that are in stock and how much they cost versus how much they should cost is varying to a crazy degree right now. And so it's almost like you have to get what you can find. However, there's a lot of things on Facebook Marketplace, so I would highly recommend Facebook Marketplace because it seems like everyone had a blue snowball at one point to stream their video game and they don't want it anymore. There are 2 handouts here. One of them is a 251 handout that I put together. I'm going to close Big Dipper here. And basically has like the scales of the 2 chord, the 5 chord, the 1 chord, or what I suggest to do for a particular 251 lick. It has the alterations of the modes of the major and the minor scale. This is like basically all of Jazz Improv 1. So this can be a cool little handout. I remember when I was in high school and I failed a music theory quiz that we had because I called all the 6 chords 2 chords. And my teacher didn't have an answer to why both the 6 chord and the 2 chord were minor. Now we know. Transcription list I put together. I put together this mostly for the Boise State class, but here's on every instrument a list of essential jazz solos for those instruments. So if you're going to have your students listen to things, have them start with these, and in this list are some things that are like introductory. Like if you were transcribing your first jazz solo and you're playing the trumpet, then like one of these Chet Baker solos is probably where you want to get. So this can be a cool resource here too. Kenny Burrell, UCLA. And then and here are my handouts for my reflection and story work stuff: reverse resume, question asking, personal mission, things like that. So that is what I've got. see if I can remember how to, I think it was Control-Shift-H. Yeah, now I got it back. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my share, and I'm going to redo my microphone. All right, I should be able to hear people now. This is what I got. So if anyone has any questions at all throughout the semester about technology or jazz things, I'm happy to help you out. And especially since things are remote, I feel like I can do 9 things at once. I'm probably one of the few people who's able to do more now that we're doing this stuff online than before, just because I was already set up with my whole nerd kingdom over here. But you know, I really appreciate you all having me on and listening to me, and for whoever's watching this in the future, technology will certainly change by the time you watch this video. So be sure to use the Googles. I wrote chords jazz curriculum. Great.
You're getting a lot of thank yous. And so I really appreciate that you did this today. I wish more people had come, but I'm going to spread the word that this is a really great resource for sure. So thank you so much. Does anybody want to say anything before we sign off? We have about 4 minutes.
Hey, Derek, we have kind of a tricky thing in West Ada in that we're going to like a hybrid schedule. So half of our kids are in class one day, and maybe Boise's doing this too, and it's split alphabetically. So I don't know about chord situation, and I have jazz band first quarter and third quarter. So I'm seeing them right at the beginning of the year, and then 9 weeks off, and then I'll see them starting in January again. So the way that my split works out is I've got 3 kids, lead trumpet, second tenor, and my bari player, I think, on day 1, and 17 kids on the other day. I don't know how chord split is. So, and I think that we can do a lot of remote stuff here this way, but that blended like in-person rehearsal thing, I think is going to be tricky. Any ideas?
Yeah, I think like, you know, when you're in person is a good time to do rhythmic things. Like you could explore, you know, like Latin rhythms and things like that, just because you're all together. It also could be a time like if you have the technology at school to record, it could be a good time to like have the 3 of them like record their parts to something together, or to kind of like go through that studio experience of some kind. Or you could use that time for the 3 of them to put their heads together on a particular topic and teach the 17 and have it be a video or something like that.
Yeah, holy cow, that's a great idea. Thanks.
Cows.
Yeah.
I don't know what a 4x4 schedule is. Sorry.
Do you want the quick rundown?
It's what she's talking about. So instead of doing a full like 7 or 8, they're doing a 4x4, so 4 classes, and then it's a quarter system, so you don't see everybody, and then they're doing hybrid on top of that, which is why they're doing it alphabetically, which also adds another layer of I probably shouldn't say it when it's recording, but nonsense. and so they're having to deal with all kinds of scheduling issues.
Wow, I think that, you know, the only thing that I can recommend, and granted I'm, you know, Oregon Trail generation over here, but come up with some kind of a production schedule for something that you're gonna do with your students that even if they're in person still happens. So it's not like those who are in person are suddenly pulled out of the experience, or those who are not in person are suddenly like not part of the experience either. And so like, you know, even if we're here, we're just going to be doing the stuff here, or, you know, have them organize the band room, but still do the stuff when they go home, you know? Wow, it's so many things are so crazy.
And yet in Boise schools, teachers at 2 high schools complained that block schedule was too scary and too hard to teach on. So we are currently straight 7.
Awesome. Well, I'm here to help you guys with your tech stuff, so hit me up.
Well, I think we're out of time, so I again want to say thank you, thank you. This was a really great session with so many resources and so many tips and tricks. And so we really thank you for your time. And I'm definitely going to reach out to Jimmy Lawrence in Canyon County. I'm coming for you, like you said. And
Yeah.
thanks again, Megan, for getting these sessions up and running.
Yeah, I found out about it through the D3 email, but yeah. Thank you all for being here, and as always, I'm here to help you out as best I can. So look forward to talking with you all in the future.